now at the end of the show, I've got to bring up something. Let's go to all of us. All right.
Today is Yud Teves, Tashin Samech Tes, on Ahmed Tes, Samech Tes.
Right, so we see we're discussing the Mila of the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, and we saw that why he was unable to be a Mokir cloud to the Yesh Nivra, which is the other extreme, was due to two factors that we'd mentioned earlier, Bekitza in the Maimah. One was that the Havdalah Sa'erech, from anything Bedemeter or Inyan of a Yesh, and a Matthias, Gashmi, or Al Haponim Yesh Matthias Nivra, and then we saw the Mila of or the Inyan rather of Pshitas. We discussed at some length yesterday the concept and the Inyan, or not yesterday, Al Haponim, when we learned last time the Inyan of Pshitas. And so we saw that that was a tam, a miti in its own right, why he was unable to be a mokir for anything in the form of a gilu or ishtalshus of a yesh nivra, because of the inyan of peshitas, which meant the inyan of withdrawal from any form of specific entity being kollel in him, even in the form of a klal moved al gabi a prat, no his petachasa. The petachas are peshitas, absolute simplicity, and that being the case, it's moving that he's not a mocker to anything which comes b'derech Matthias, because a Matthias is already the hyper of the idea of peshitas. And we're holding it. We say that the Yesh Amiti bechinas a peshitas shaloi, who bechinas heder Matthias. The key to the idea of heder hamatzias in this Inyan is the peshitas. Umishum zeh, eino bebchinas to Amud Yud, eino bebchinas mokke, me'achas eino bebchinas matzias. As we pointed out earlier in the Shurim, that a mokke means already a source which has some basic erech or some form of kiruv to the thing which comes out of it. So if we say that he's not Begeder Matthias himself, and he's Betachlis Hapshita, which means that he's negated in his very essence from the whole concept of anything specific, and therefore he can't be a mokir to the Inyan of Matthias. And then he goes on to say, Kumoi ha'oyer shemahava alidei kli davke. Like we find the Lamaila in the Inyan of the Hisavas Yesh, that there are two Inyanim, the Oyer, which is actually Mahave, but it's Mahave alidei Kli Davke. In other words, that the Ike Mahave is Malchus Tatzilas, but Beklal, the Hisavas comes through the Inyan of the Kelim, and that's through the union and the slapshus of the Oyer Ein Seif with the Inyan of Kelim. And Davke Ali, they say it's possible for there to be the Matthias Ayesh. But the Oyer in its own right wouldn't be able to bring about the Inyan of the Yesh if it was purely Mitzad the Oyer. And that's Mitzad, the Pshitas of the Oyer. And therefore we need to be the Yichud with the Inyan of Kelim. And particularly in this case, at the Inyan of Kelim, the Malchus Tatzilat. And that's what he's Mavaya in Tanya in the famous Geras HaKodesh chapter 20. Kamesha Kosapi Geras HaKodesh Ir Gamoy Chad. The Alter Rebbe brings over there the statement from the Tikkun Isaiah that Ir Gamoy Chad, Ir Chayeo Chad, Ir Gamoy Chad. That the Eivish and the Oiris are one, and the Eivish and the Kelim are one. So he said Shebohem, meaning the Inyan from Gamoihi, which is the Kelim, Bohem vi al Yodom mi ayin le yesh. So there's lacking a word there. And if you look in the expression how it is in that Igeris from the Alter Rebbe, then the word livroi occurs, to create. And it's well known that in Lashon Kodesh the word livroi, create, means the Yisavas Yesh Mi Ayin Davke, as Mavur in the famous Ramban, one of the first Rambans in his Pirush al HaChumash. So therefore he says that the Inyan of the Yichud between Ihu, which is the Eibishter, and Gamoihi and the Kalim, well, that is Livrei Bohem Ve'al Yodom, that is in order that he should be able to create in them, or literally in them and through them. Ve'al Yodom, Bohem Ve'al Yodom, Mi'ayin Le'yesh. That in order that there should be the complete jump, the absolute chidush, or heder ha'era klal, between ayin and yesh, that comes through the kelim davka. She'ef shali is ha'isavas mi'ha'oyer, you can't have the isavas mi'ha'oyer, ki im al yedeya a kli. It's only when the oyer is mishachid with the kli, then it's possible for there to be the livrei yesh mi'ayin. And that's what we call the isavas. So if you look over there carefully, then we need to understand that itself. That statement needs a little bit of biur, a little bit of modification, because if you look carefully over there, the Alter Rebbe says that the only one, in inverted commas, who can create yesh mi'ayin is atzmusei mahusei elamaitzel yizborach. In other words, only the Eibishter himself. Only the Eibishter be'atzmusei is b'yichelte, like he writes over the Hulavade b'koichei u'v'yichelte lahaveses hayesh mi'ayin v'yefes ha'muchla. That's a famous statement over there. So then he goes on to say that ability which is in the Eibishter and in him himself, only him alone, well, that goes through the medium of the oyer. And like he says immediately in the sentence before that, since the oyer is ke'ein hamoyer, or they use the expression ke'ein. And in Rav Adrushim from the Rabbeim, we find they say the oyer is me'ein with a mem. But dort in Tanya it is with a kof. Yeah, that the oyer is ke'ein hamoyer. I must have, I've often wanted to take the tilka to look up in the grammatical sources what's the difference between the word ke'ein and me'ein. There must be some nuance there. Anyway, as they state, the Alter Rebbe writes over there, the oyer is ke'ein hamoyer, and therefore the Yisavas is with the oyer, through the oyer, not the etzem maitel himself. We don't want to say the Yisavas comes directly from the atzmas, but it goes through the medium of the oyer, which means that the oyer has all the power and all the koyach of hulavade, b'koyach v'yacholte. So if that's the case, then why can't the oyer, why can't it just create if it's got the koyach of the moyer? And the moyer is hulavade b'koyach v'yacholte, l'havas min hayesh v'ayim v'efes ha'muklat. Why do we have to say that it has to have the minyan it has to have the inyan HaKeli? So it's much more over there that once again everything has to go with a certain seder. Everything has to be, as we pointed out on many occasions, muvan b'seichel ha'odam gamkein, or muvan auch upon him alidei staushus, that the odam should understand what is really how he can explain the whole inyan for the Yisavas from the Mokeh Harishon. And therefore, if we'll say that the Eibishter is bli gvul amiti, was enoch hanami, he has in himself a inyan of the ability to produce gvul, because of mitzad the shleimus of the atzmas, he can also produce gvul. But that gvul gufa is in an even from bli gvul, being miyuchad as it is in the Eibishter's essence. And if you look carefully over there, the Alter Rebbe says that the Eibishter himself is atzmusei mema mavusei. In other words, that he's from his own self, nothing else, God forbid, brought him about. No, he's metziusei me'atzmo, atzmusei metziusei me'atzmusei. His own being is from his own self. And it's not that he created himself, he's just there. That Maila is also there in the oyer. There's also a inyan in the oyer of the etzem, what you might call shleimus of the atzmas, the etzem wondrousness of the Atzmus that doesn't exist in anything else. And therefore, in order to bring that down, even from there should be a specific entity should come from that. Therefore, the oil has to be mishached with the inyan keli, and alidei it's mishached with the keli. So, what is the keli? The keli is the koach hagvul, how it's already not the koach hagvul that is in the atzmus, but the koach hagvul has already, as it were, brought that out from the atzmus also. So when the oil goes out from the atzmus, it goes b'der dveikis for ha'ora. It's noticeable how it's connected with him. When the keli goes out in the form of a separation from him, and that's what we call the rishimo. Well, the shorsh of the kelim is the rishimo. That's a power the Eibishter made, that the beginning of separation is the rishima, and that begins from from him, that he produces it because that's also the shleim atzmas, that there can also be gvul. So what happens is that then the bli gvul, which is the oyer, and the gvul unite together, and they bring about the inyan of the savas of the keli. And so the bli gvul is the oyer. It's not just that it's bli gvul, but it's also the union of metzius me'atz. It's got the whole shleimus of the atzmus in it. And therefore, the isavas from the oyer itself is not what we want. The isavas from the oyer itself could mitzad kol yochel go maybe, but not even from seder masuda. In order that the oyer should be mahaver, it has to be united with the kli. And adidei, the kli, it's possible for there to be the actual hisavas of the yet, which means that one way or another, the kli gains the upper hand, finally speaking, because the oyer is bligvul, and the keli causes in the inyan of the oyer a certain limitation, which means that we eventually get to the inyan of the yesh. So we see that the oyer, without the kli, wouldn't be able to be mahava. What that indicates to us the unbelievable milah that there is in the oil, that even though it's the one that's really mahava, if it wouldn't have the kli, it wouldn't really be able to be mahava. Once again, mitzad omnipotence, it would, but mitzad the way we want the whole seder to go, then it wouldn't be able to be in that way. So therefore says the Rebbe, ach shom. However, over there, that's not really mitzad the inyan of pshitas. He says, ach shom u mitzad mailas ha'oyer. Shehu muvdal be'erach min matzias hayeh. He said, over there, that's the first factor that we mentioned earlier in the Maimah. Not the inyan of pshita so much, but over there, he said, that's the etzem maila of the oyer. Now, maila means a level or a elevation, legabi the yesh anivra, which eventually comes out through the keli, and that means that it's completely withdrawn in its own self-elevation. In other words, we're talking about a level judgment between the oyer and the ultimate kli. So we say that level judgment is ein areich. It's an inyan van heder ha'erech mudal be'erech min matzias hayeh. So he said, if you look carefully in Tanya over there, we're not talking mitzad the pshitas. No, we're talking mitzad the etzem inyan, that is the atzmus, and that's the giver of the atzmus, and the atzmus being metziusei matzmusei, and being all those unbelievable bli gvul inyanim what the atzmus has in itself. Therefore, it's completely beyond altogether any ability to be a mocker for the mitzad, that tremendous elevated milah that it has in its own self. And therefore, said the Rebbe, that's not the concept of pshitas. That's just like a comparative erech compared to the inyan of the yesh. So therefore he says, there it's not really a dogma of what we're trying to discuss here, because it's mitzad the inyan of the havdolas ha'erech, which is the first factor. Omnom, inyan ha-peshitas, this concept that we're talking about, which is the inyan of peshitas, well, that's koil base inyanim, shahein base milas. It's koil in itself two inyanim, which are two milas. V'hainu inyan havdolas ha'erech, v'inyan heder ha'matiyah. Now here we see now that we're summing up with the concept that really these two factors are really one and the same. Is legabi the Indian pshitas. In other words, that the pshitas is so immensely different. The concept of pshitas is so immensely different that automatically is koilin in itself that Indian of Heda Ha'eret that we're talking about, and also it's got in itself its Maila Atzmi, which is the Indian from Pshita. Well, from that we see that the Indian from Pshitas is a tremendously elevated concept, like Gabi di Atzmas, that's even higher than that what he mentions over there in Tanya. That we must have the Kli because the air is Me'ain Ha or Ka'ain Hamoya, and therefore it's completely moved over anything to do with Ayesh. But the Indian from Pshitas is even more than that. And if you say Pshitas, you automatically coil all that Mila. In other words, despite the fact that it looks a tremendous Mila over there in Tanya, but the very fact that you say the word Mila, well, that means that there's some like comparative judgment, or saying this is completely beyond any shaykhs or klal to that Indian, which is eventually the Yesha Hanivra. Which means it's Okosof, you're saying that this has an advantage or a Maila legabizeh. And that's the word Maila. The very fact that you use a word like Maila indicates that you're talking about some form of a comparative type of, how would you call it, hierarchy in some way or another. But when you say Peshitas, you mean a completely different idea. You mean that the thing is not in any form of, it has no constituent, any aspect to it, itachas apshitas, so there is just moved legamri in another oifen altogether, all on its own, and that's koilul, I feel this tremendous mile of Heda Ha'erech also, because something which is tachas apshitas has anyway no error to anything, can immediately say anything, then that's already some form of a concept. Pshitas is not any concept. It doesn't have anything. It's not made up or koil in itself any specific concept. So therefore, what it follows is that we're saying that the inner from Pshitas is what you might call the toya, if we can use such an expression, Ha'amiti for the Atzmas. In other words, when you say he's betachlos ha'peshitas, then you're talking you're describing the Atzmas almost in the most perfect way you could describe it. And you're saying that he's completely muvdal from any Indian klal. He's tachas ha'peshitas. And therefore, that automatically includes in itself, if he's betachas ha'peshitas, then he must be muvdal be'era from any madrega klal. How much more so the Yesha Nira. That's what the Rebbe says in the brackets, a whole new concept, that the tachlis apshitas of the Atzmas is like a summing up perfection of the Atzmas more than anything else we've said up till now. The very essence of Hashem, if you call him tachlis apshitas, that makes out that automatically he's got all the sinyuf and Heda Ha'erech. It also means that he's not a mockit or anything, klal. It's got all the milas that you could want in describing the Atzmas. In other words, pshitas. This concept of pshitas. So therefore, says the Rebbe, that's the emissar bio why he can't be a mockit. Because if he's absolute pshitas, then he can't possibly be gather of a mocker klal. Mashenkin in Tanya, he means he's moved off from that to be anything like that. But the very fact you say he's moved off means that there's some like basis of shlila at least. You say you got this level and this another completely level altogether. But if you say he's betachas apshit, it's just another oifen altogether. It's another definitional gather and status all on its own. And that's what he said over there in Tamavov. The word Peshitas, the concept of Peshitas, is very difficult for us to be Teves, because all of our relative ideas and all of our experiences in life are all about entities that in some way relate to other entities, or they've got in themselves some form of a source or something to other entities, or something which is and yet it's not. It's betachas ha'pshita. It doesn't really have anything in it, even though it's there. Now that we don't, it's very hard for us to picture. Klal. That's the musig aki kloliv aki koilo legabi de atzma. And then we write in the brackets that even this Mila, which is connected with the whole concept of who levadi b'koich, that means he himself only, but that's only as it was Sokol. So a tremendous form of relativity, even though it's a relativity that's ein arei klav, it's by Havdalah, absolute Havdalah, it's a form of summing up one concept like Gabi another. Pshita is just another world altogether. It's completely another concept. And therefore he said, it's koil b'derech mamela, both things. Its own Indian and that other Indian as well. So it follows Lefi that the oir mi'eina moya, or ka'eina moya, has now got a new whole perfection in it, that it's also pshita. And that's a wondrous thing. However, like we pointed out in the koiches of the nefesh, we said the koiches of the nefesh also pshutim, like the way they come out into the keli haguf. We have to say that the very fact that they are nimshach mi'ah nefesh in a form of pshitas means that they've already been nimshach upon him from the absolute simplicity of the nefesh in a way to approach ultimately being some way shaykhs to the koiches that they are in the actual group. The same thing here. The fact that the iron of the Yesh Amiti went out in a way that it's already batatas hapshitas now, Gabi all the elements and all the nevroim which are going to come, means that it's not mamish tachlis hapshitas, but it is pshita. And therefore you're careful to say that the atzmus is tachlis hapshitas, and this is a union from pshitas. In other words, the pshitas of the Atmas are absolutely beyond any description, and this is pshitas like Gabi, all the inyonim which are going to be nimshach in say the hishtalshalos, and how much more so the yesh haniva. So that's the union of the concept of pshita. Now he goes on to say, for oid yuvan, we can understand, for oid yuvan inyan heder amatzias shaloi, the heder matzias of the ayin of the Yesh Amiti. Another way we can understand it. Now here we're saying the fact that it's not a matzius, and therefore it's not able to be beged mokir to the Yesh Nivra. We're not saying pshitas now. We're just saying heder matzius. Because before we're talking about how heder matzius was a result of pshita. Now we're just going back to the actual concept of heder matzius. Just like we said earlier, that the very fact that it's moved over Erech is also enough to say that it's not begeder, being a mocker to anything to do with Matzias. Now we're going to give another biur, how we can understand that it's not shy to Matzias. But not Pshita. Oid yuvan inyan heder Matzias, shaloi, dehinei, bechinas ha'ayin shalayesh amiti, imi yesh, shehu bechinas ha'ore levad, mikol mokim harehu bechinas devekes bim koirei. Ulazeis, hu bechinas ayin vo efes be'etzem mahusai, de kaloi chashiv. So, a ha'ora, how do we understand a ha'ora? A ha'ora has to be dovuk in its ma'or. If it's not, it's just not there. There's no possible gather of Metzias of a ha'ora without it being betachlis cleavage or devekis in connection with its moya. For example, if you light a match or any candle, for that to give off light, then the light has to be connected with the flame. If somehow you severed the light from the flame, there just wouldn't be any light. Because the light in its very Metzias comes from the flame. It's the light of the flame. And the same with the Ur HaShemesh. If something would come between us and the Ur and the Shemesh, and the Ur wouldn't be able to go through it, then there wouldn't be Ur on that other side of that particular thing. Because the whole inyan of Ur is only shaykh when it's dovuk in the Shemesh. But if you separate it from the Shemesh, then there's no Ur. In other words, we can't imagine that the Shemesh would give off oil, and then that oil would just float around in the atmosphere and give off light. No such thing. Only if the oil is dovuk to the Shemesh, then it's oil. If it's not dovuk to the Shemesh, there's no oil. It's just not there. Amami, that follows what he said, that every ha'ora is only devekis bim koirei, which means that the devekis in the mokir, in the oil, is essential to the very Metzias of the earth. In other words, without that devekis, you don't have any oil. It just doesn't exist. So therefore he says that every ha'ora has to have the inyan of dveikis bim koiroi. Ulazois, hu b'chinas ayin vo'efes be'etzem hu say the kaloi choshiva. Due to that fact, it's completely and utterly nothing in its own self, and it's like as if it were nothing. Why? From words. So he says, Diliyes, shu b'chinas gilu ha'etzem, hari hu b'chinas kiru hu dveikis bim koiroi, ve'im kein nirgash boi b'chinas makoiroi, shu ha'yesho ha'amid. I'm sorry, Maisha, but you seem to have made some sort of shocher b'chazorah of that cap. I'm sure your throat and your head and your eyes or your ears or whatever it may be, that they'll all be b'tachlis abriyos and everything will be beseder, even for the next 35 minutes or so. You don't sip from that cup. So it's ein good. It's ein refuah shleima afilu belize. Oh, says the Rebbe, if we're going to say that the very essence of the very matzias of the oyer is alidei dveikis bimkoi, right? Then that means that the oyer is what we call margish makoira. It means it's petachas akiruv. It's in the most possible nearness and dveikis, because if it's not cloven to the wife, it's not there. So therefore, it's margish makoira. It senses and is literally in a state of feeling or awareness of its marker. And that's a big cloud. Something that's dveikis. And dveikis atzmi ad kedekach, that's nagay, and the very etzem of that inyan, it feels the dove in which it is dove. And it makes sense, as I, because if it's so close and it's so necessary in its own self to have the moya, then it's margish the inyan of the moya. It feels and senses the inyan from the moya. Now, it may not feel and sense the moya b'kol shleim somewhere, because the moya is incredibly more than just a thing from which the air goes off. It does have a hergish in the moya. In the moya from whence it comes. So therefore he said that in the oya which is meir, or in this ayin which is meir from the yesh or amiti, there's a hargosha, a feeling and an awareness of its moker, and therefore he says, im kein nirish boi mekoire, and what is mekoire? Yeshua amiti. Validei zeh nase b'chinas ayin vo'efes mamish, b'chinas he'adera matzias le gamri. He said, therefore, if it feels and senses and is aware in itself of yesh or amiti, then it knows that it's only a ha'ora buvad, and therefore it feels the kaloi shiva. It feels and is aware in itself just of how nothing it is like avida. In other words, if you are anything apart from the yesh or amiti, and you also margish the yesh or amiti, then you realize how your whole situation is heipercha matzias. You understand? With the yesh or amiti, he's the only real existing entity. If your whole matzias is only b'tzad your dveikis in him, but that allows you to feel him, then you feel the unbelievable difference between the yesh or amiti and any other form of matzias, which is absolutely a kaloi or shaloi be'er klavain was a kol geder legabi yesh or amiti. So there he said that's the mila of the yoyer. And why is the yoyer mamish kaloi chashiva? It's absolutely nothing in its own self, and in itself knows in its own self how it's nothing. In other words, that's not something that it has to spend a long time working out. The oyer, by definition, knows its own chashiva, loy chashiva, its own absolute bittul, and therefore it's a bittul in etzem amahus. And therefore he said it's not in a form of matzias. It's heder amatzias. Now, the truth of the matter is that ayin vo'efes are two phrases, as well known. Ayin means that we negate another possibility. Efes means that it's just absolute naught. In other words, if you say a thing is ayin, then you mean it's not what normally we understand, which is matzias. Ayin means the shlila of that. Efes means it's just absolutely botel v'tachas abitel in itself. Because efes means naught, and ayin means the negation. That's what ayin. So therefore he said it's not only an ayin for ayin, but it's also an ayin for efes. And therefore, if it's efes, if it's just absolute nothing in its own self, therefore it's not ayin for a machias. It's b'chinas heder a machias. Like Amrei, Shahare Lagabi Makoirei Kain Hubi Emet. Ki Lagabi the Yesho Amiti, then that is the truth. Sha'ena Teves Mokim Umachias Klau. Lagabi the Yesho Amiti, then that yes, which is only a ha'ora into the bargain, absolutely no form of any grasp of any Machias or any state, Klau Lagabi the Yesho Amiti. And so therefore he said that's in effect the emissary situation, and the Uya being dog feels that, and the Uya is aware of it. And therefore the Uya is absolutely efes, being absolute efes, it can't be a mocker to anything. It's heder amachias, and therefore it can't be a mocker to it. Wainanu now goes on to explain a huge moshel, and that you're going to take his pages to deal with. But we have to think carefully what we've sort of come up with now. We've come up with now with, as it were, three, as it were, ways of understanding, or three ways of looking at this this ayin from the Yesh Amiti, which, for all intents and purposes, is the oyer hameya mi'atzvus. To be quite frank about it, that's in effect what it is. The oyer, which is ka'ein hamoya, but the Ganze does. And then, after that, there's the infant symptom origin with the other inyan. But that's the ayin shel yesh amit. So, kumtois, one way of understanding it is that we've said that it's heder ha'erech, it's havdolas ha'erech altogether. Then we said because it's eating from peshitas, and now we've said that because it's margish makoyle, it's botil in its very own self. It's completely and utterly aware of its own nothingness. Therefore, it's bottled be'etzem mahus, in pintel rein, as they say in English, right in its own self. It's botel because it's aware of the mokia, and the mokia is murgash boy. In other words, beheder hamachi. So, kumtois, the first one, the first thing that we said, well, that's not a'inim from bittel. It's not because of the bittel of the earth. On the contrary, it's what you might call the remomus of the earth. It's absolute exaltation from all other levels. How it's kilo got in itself the koyach of the atzmas. So what you might call that's mitzad the remomus and the greatness and the wondrousness of the oya, and therefore it's not able to be a mocker to anything like a yesh aniva. The zweite Sach, well, that's an inyan, how the whole inyan of the oyer, or the yesh of the ayin of the yesh amiti, but that's just a completely another definitional quantity or entity called pshitas, and that's tachlis pshitas, and that's inyan making it more like a direct gilu of the atzmas than anything else. But once again, that's not bittul, that's just being the state of pshitas because of its being, as it were, a gili of the atzma. And then the third one, that's already bittul. The third one is that the oyer is not a getter because the oyer is botel legabi its moki. Pshitas is like a gili of the moyer. It's like the moyer all over again. Over here, we're talking about the reason why it's not able to be a mocker to any other Indian, how much more so the Yesh Hanivra, because it's botel, betachas abitel, something else. And that's mitzad the Indian of the dveikis in the moya. And therefore, it follows that the third term is a term where the fact that it's not a mocker to the Yesh Nivra is nifal, it's caused in the ayin of the Yesh Amiti mitzad something else, mitzad ha'oyer elim, not ha'oyer, mitzad the what you might call the unbelievable greatness of the atzmas. Well, that's puyul, a bittul in the earth, and so therefore the bittul, and therefore he finishes with the statement that it's not Teves mokim or machias klau. Now when you say something not Teves Mokim, then you mean maybe it could have been Teves Mokim. Yeah, maybe he could describe it as being something, and he said, oh no, Lagabi Zeh, yeah, lo Teves Mokim. Yeah, oh, compared to that, it's absolutely not Teves Mokim. And therefore we could say that those three Lashonas, Ayin or Efes, and Loi Teves Mokim Klau, or Matthias, that's also like three different ways of describing Bittul. Now, Bittul means that you're Batel in your very self, not because you're just an illustration of the Moya. No, you're Batel in your very self. So if something's Batel in its very self, then there has to be some reason for a Bittul. You know, just Batel, something makes you Batel. In other words, the word Bittul means always Lagabi something else. For example, you talk about the Bittul of a Chacham Koton Lagabi a Chacham Godel. It's brought down in Siddur that that's a dogma for the Inifanain of Teves Mokim Klau. Yes, a Chacham Koton, he's a Chacham, he knows a lot in Torah and he knows a lot in Yonim. But when he comes in front of a Chacham Godel, then he just loses his whole Matthias altogether. And somebody who's not a Chacham Beklal, he comes in front of a Chacham Godel, he'll talk, he'll say, oh, you're all he doesn't know anything about Chachma, otherwise in school. Therefore, he's not bottled, and he's not bottled, he just continues being what he is. Oh, but somebody who's already got a little bit of an idea of what Chachma is, and all of a sudden he hears a few words from the Chacham Godel, then he becomes bottled completely, the whole Matthias, worse, because he knows that his Chachma, like Gabi the Chacham Godel, is not Teves Makom. It's there, it's Kilu, what we might be able to describe as something, but it's just not. He knows it's just worthless, there's no point. And that's what we call here the Teves Mokim. Yeah, in other words, when you come in front of something that's incredibly an Ein Arei, greater than what your particular Matthias is, then you don't have any Matthias Klau. You lose your taking of any place. You don't have any place. As they say in Yiddish, hot kainot nicht. You have absolutely no place in front of such a person. That's one thing. And therefore, that's Heret Fizmon. Then we say, Ayin for Efes are like higher gradations in that concept of Bittul. I mentioned, come to understand that not just he doesn't have any place, but I mean, if it weren't for the fact that the unbelievable greatness of this person, he would have a little bit of place, because he does after all, but he is. Yeah? So then there's a higher level, which is called Ayin. What Ayin means that you've completely cancelled out even that little bit that he has. You say, oh no, because that little bit that he has helped him to become bottled in a way. And now we say, no, that's absolutely nothing. And then we can go even higher and we can say, it's naught. You know, there's no place. But all Lagabi, as it were, from whence he comes, or for was, which means that those are levels in Bittul. They're called Bittul. They've been nifal in him. They've been poiled in him by the greatness of his mokeh and the muzzle that he happens to feel his mokeh. Because sometimes people can stand in front of their mokeh and not even feel it. That's another muzzle. Oh, he's got at least that muzzle that he feels his mokeh. Whenever he's bottled by shleisha, we find him ha'ilu. Oh, the other two times are not mitzad bittul. The other time mitzad pshita, that's the definition of the Atzman. So the fact he's got the mile that's kilu misgali in him. And the first one is also it's mitzad the raimus or the mile of the not mitzad his bittul. What we're going to do now is talk about bittul. What he's going to bring a whole moshel to understand this last one that we've given. And we're going to talk about different madrigas in bittul. And so we're going to see that at the beginning there's a bittul which looks to be a very simple type of bittul, and it's a very, you would tend to sort of wipe it away a little bit at the beginning when you first see it. You know, the whole swing of the argument tends to take us in that direction. But we're going to see that there's really a tremendous might in that form of bittul as we'll be moving. But a higher form of bittul in the actual eichus and quality of the actual bittul itself is where it's nifo alidei, a much higher thing, and the thing becomes ois, Matthias, and that's what we were just talking about. That was the bittul of the ayin of the Yeshu Amit. So he says, Inyanu the inyan in this is, the hine yesh beis bechinas bittul. There's two, generally speaking, forms, or what you might call aspects of bittul. Even though there's really a lot of detailed aspects of bittul, but just generally speaking, there's two forms of nullification of the self, or self-nullification. So he says, what are they? Bittul hayesh lo ayin, the bittul of the yesh to the ayin, or bittul amiti, and another form of bittul which is genuine bittul, shenikra bittul atzmi. In other words, that's a bittul in the very etzem, that the whole etzem loses itself. Or bittul hayesh is that he remains what he is, but he's bottled to ayin. In other words, he's bottled to something he knows nothing about. He doesn't really understand it, but he just knows that, he's bottled to something ununderstandable and ungraspable beyond him altogether. And he says, yeah, he's bottled, he's out, and that's it. Bittul amiti is where the very etzem itself comes to the awareness of how it's bottled, and so it loses its whole Matthias altogether. So that's the two general concepts instead of bittul hayesh and bittul hamachias, or bittul b'matziyah. So that what we're hinting at is that bittul that we described in the yesh amiti mitzad the hergish mekoire, that he's magish, he's mokir, well, that's bittul amiti. That's what we call bittul b'etzem. Mashenkin, a lower form of bittul, which we're going to see is more shy to the avodah of the yesh anivra lamata, well, that's called bittul hayesh. In other words, there's something there which is botel. So how does that become botel? If it's there in the form of yesh, how does it all of a sudden become botel? So we're going to see that the wondrousness of the bittul hayesh is that the yesh itself participates in its own bittul. Mashenkin, the bittul of that ayin of the yesh amiti, alidei hergish mekoiroi, it doesn't participate in its own bittul. It's just bottled mitzad the fact that it's in the incomparability of the moya, and it feels the moya, therefore it's just automatically bottled. And my kunta is that if we just take a quick glance at these two classifications, then one is alidei ha'oyer, or a Matthias Atzuma, which is Lamaila from the entity we're talking about, and it's Maya in that entity and causes it to become Bittul B'etzem. And the other way, Bittul Hayesh, is that it's something, but it works on itself, as it were, and it becomes bottled, but not Bottle B'etzem Amahus, because it still walks around being what it was before, but it says it's bottled. And that's why it's called bittul hayesh la'ayin, because it says I don't really know what I'm bottled to be honest. I just know that I'm bottled to that which is called ayin. And we'll see that that's what we're going to play down, as it were, as we go along here. But later we're going to have to maybe play it up.
Is this inyan of bittul hayesh, the lower level, is only shy to the yidden? How can it be shy
to yidden?
The yidden, that it's a mitzvah that works on itself and
it would appear that that's quite a good question in its own right. It would appear that all forms of bittul, any form of genuine bittul, whether it be bittul hayesh or bittul mitzvah, is only shy by yidden.
You just said or.
I have to be very careful here what we say, but it would appear that by the Umas Ha'olam, they can be botel. They can be botel. But it would only be in certain chosen members of the Umas Ha'olam that they would be botel mitzad ezi avodah shebahim. But we could say that the Umas Ha'olam can become botel alidei what the aims to make some botel. But then, it's not that they become botel in a way that they really know that they're botel. Things happen to them in a way that through them being, as it were, nifal alidei, the alien, then, as it were, they are megala, the greatness of the Avish, to use an expression, whether they wanted it or whether they didn't. By Yidden, it's, even in the case of bittul b'matzias, where it's all nifal alidei, the alien, to a certain extent, we have to say that there's a certain bechira b'dorah. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting you asked that because I'm playing with the possibility of discussing a similar concept in the Shir. Always being I don't give away my secrets. It's interesting that particular case. What you just ask here, what is the concept of bittul by the Yom Hashanah? Because this whole business with Mitzrayim and what happened to him. Yeah, and the whole, with Teves, he gave him 10 makis and the whole mass, and he sent Moshe Rabbeinu to him, and I go to Seder, and it took so much time. So, Nishal Hashayla, we should the Mitzri, there's such a huge process that the Teves went through before he finally finished off with the Mitzri and brought out the Yidden out of their midst.
My question was actually regarding Lamaila. How can there be anything but a bottle that...
Lamaila is only bottled by Matthias, or ahead of Teves Mokim, or, the 3 lines that I mentioned, the 3 forms of bittul. This whole Indian of bittul hayesh only begins in Bria Yitzirava Asiya, and the Ikke is in Olam Asiya. The Ikke bittul hayesh is in this world. Okay. Utebittel hayesh, hu shehayesh choizer liyesh b'chinas ayin. Understand? Choizer liyesh b'chinas ayin. It goes back to be ayin. In other words, that really it is ayin, or really it was ayin, or it is ayin, but it doesn't live that way. That's not the way things are. What is bittel hayesh? You go back to your emerson state and you start being what you really are. In other words, it's like you're going back to your real state. So that's a very interesting lesson. You won't find that very often in Torah. He goes back to be ayin. From ayin, in other words, he cancels out his ayin. He cancels out his yesh and makes it into a nothing. The bittul of the yesh is that he takes participation in it. And it could, to use the expression in Yiddish, macht sich pottel. He makes himself pottel. Now that's a very important question, this whole concept of bittul hayesh, and that's what we're going to see, the great milah of bittul hayesh, despite all of its littleness in what I might call quantity, like every other bittles, but it's got this tremendous inyan that he does it. You understand? He is making himself pottel. In other words, that's al-yidei the avoider of the yesh in his own, what you might call pintle. Not because of an incredibly high light is mayor into him. He's not a keli klal for that. At this particular stage, as you might say, he's not beklal magish zoch inyanim. Kiyim, how does he become bottle? Bavidosai v'yigiyosai b'koyach. Be'avidosai, with his own effort, v'yigiyah, with his own struggle. And it's always brought in scissors. The word yigiyah means you're working against what you might call the stream. You're working against the zero. Yigiyah means it's not just a work. It's not just a detailed series of efforts that you've got to make. It's a struggle. In other words, it's working against an opponent. And in other words, the concept of yesh is an opponent to Elokus. If he's going to make himself bottle, he's working very, very, very hard. With his own power. Now we're going to see as we go along that that's a very wondrous thing. And every bittul that comes through effort and through struggle, in other words, fighting against an opponent, who begins bittul hayesh bilvad. Here we swing back again. There is no letting you get away with too much at the moment. He says, but he said it's only bittul hayesh bilvad. The maximum is that the yesh becomes a bit bottled to the eye. In other words, still doesn't really know, it doesn't really masig be'em, but it becomes batel. Yeah, but he said it's only bitl hayesh bil vad. Ukiyadua, and as well known, the Indian toireach v'yagia, that the Indian of what you might call sweating effort, toireach, means, how do you call it, preoccupied effort, v'yagia, and struggle against what you might call resisting factors, hu Indian zichuk ubitul hakelim, shezehu rak bitul hayeshes levad. So he says, anything which comes al-idei effort, and al-idei toreach, al-idei struggling effort, preoccupied effort, he said that can only be with a kli. Because what is a kli? A kli is an entity in its own right where it says, I am. That's what a kli is. Even the kelim how they are in Atzilas. The Gavidia, they say we are what we are. Down here, Lamata, the goof particularly, and the Nefesh Abamis, they not only say I am, but they say I, and then they pause and say am. That everything is kilo, the kli, down here is a kli muragash, a felt and a wear kli with the guns, a takeif of a kli. Anishoma is where? Anishoma in her shirish is a chelak and however it shouldn't be, ki ner mitzvah, ner Hashem nishmas adam, the Indian of a neshama is a ner, it's oil, it's the Indian from light. And he said, bittul in light is another Indian altogether. You don't need to make bittul in light. Light has got bittul in itself, like we just saw. The being as it is there, it has bittul. It's just that the bittul runs up against a resistant power, and it can't really express the bittul. So if you want to have any sort of bittul which really comes mitzad the neshama, then you've got to work on the what you might call the opposing force, which is the kli. And therefore bittul hayesh, to make your neshama be meir, a bit in your goof, that at least tell the goof, listen, there's something that you don't understand, you don't know anything about, but at least be batil, at least keep yourself away to it, or that is be'ikah with the kli. That's be'ikah with the actual goof and the nefesh abamiyas. There's a be'ikah with the kli, and the more you mazachik the kli, but there the neshama is able to get through a little bit and enter the situation and tell him a little bit what it means bittul. But whatever it will manage to teach him will only be bittul hayesh. Which nimtzul he said that the emes hayesh is the goof and the nefesh and the kli, and bittul hayesh means to make that kli through yagia, v'toireach and aveda, to make it more of a idol zichuk. What he says here, zichuk u bittul hakelim. Zichuk means like purification, like making them idle, and then the neshama is able to get through a little bit of a message. But whatever it will get through, the kli will still be so much of a kli that it will only be bittul hayesh. It will only be a form of telling us, I know you don't really understand all this, and you don't really grasp all this, and you don't, but nonetheless, we've got to be bottled and we've got to give ourselves away, so that even the goof and the nefesh abamis agree somewhat to that bittul, through the fact that they've been idled out. So therefore he said the ikir is the in a bittul v'zichuk, hakelim, shezehu b'chinas rak bittul hayeshus bilva. It's only the in of the yeshes. Am I in the right place here?
Yeah.
Huh? Did I jump in anything?
No.
I didn't? No. Good. Okay. Ukemoike yuvan da bittul shebekoyach atzmi, or this bittul which comes with his own effort. Hainu al yedei aveda v'yagia, hu b'chinas bittul hayesh. So it will follow then that since the inyan of bittul hayesh is with the inyan of kelim, and to be mezachik the keli, and therefore it follows that in the Adam also, that what he does with his own power, well, that can only be bittul hayesh, because it's be'ikah in the Adam, that's a yagi and effort with his go. It can only be bittul hayesh. Ma she'en kein, kisha bittul umitzad gilui ha'oyer elyoin hu b'derech mamela b'li avoda v'yagia, and it becomes bittul amiti. In other words, where the oira alien is mayor and the receiver is what you might call koilet that oir, he absorbs that oir, and he's aware of it, then he just becomes bottle completely, absolutely. But how does he become bottle? Automatically. It's not that he has to make any effort. The whole reason why he needs bitla yesh, because he's got this kli in the way. What the kli is not masig, the unbelievable mila of the oir. It can only be masig a certain, what you might call proximate type of story, but the neshama manages to tell it. But he said, where the oir is understood, or where the oir is appreciated, or even felt by the receiver, by the makabel, then he just loses his whole matias. Or he doesn't lose his matias mitzad himself, because he does anything about it. The oir just automatically makes him batel. He just becomes, as it were, nikla and absorbed in the oir. Amamila comes out of his head that each one's got a, as you might call a milo mitachisoran in a way. Yeah, in other words, the chisoran of bitl hayesh is in the etzem bitl. It's only a partial bitl, and it's only to something which is not really aware of on the part of the thing becoming batel. Right. And therefore calls it ayin, yesh el ayin. Or on the other hand, there's the mila of it does it itself. Yeah, and the intelligent reader is already picking up there's a certain nuance there, that's got a value. Where it's done in its own self, that has a certain value. Mashikin, when it's bittul amiti, which comes through the gili of Elikus, makes itself known to the receiver, and comes in a massive way, that the receiver just can't avoid the massive revelation of the divine oyer. So then, the bittul is in the etzem quality, and the bittul, that's a bittul amiti. Of it's got what you might call the chisoran, that he didn't do it. It was the oyer that did it. The oyer was just so immense that he just became automatically batel. The bittul is a mamela dika bittul. Maybe that's a sort of a, in ultimate judgments, that may have in itself a slight, what you might call chisoran. But when I get to the etzem bittul, it's a bittul amiti. Each one's got its own, what you might call, aspect to it, which can be described as a mila and a chisoran. And then I said that's the difference between the two. And then what we said, bittul atzmi or bittul amiti, well, that's going to mean that the makabel just gets completely swept away or loses his whole self in the gili, which is so massive that nothing stands in its way. But where it's left up to him and he has to do the avodah, then he becomes bottle, but only partially, because he's not really aware. And he calls it ayin. He's not aware of the alien. He only calls it ayin. You and Zeh says, we can understand this. He said, "Kemoi begashmias rekovin hagan." And now we go back to this famous marshal of things growing in the ground. But he says, this time we are talking about a slightly different idea. That if we take the inyan in Gashmias of literally the rotting away of the garin, the seed which you plant in the ground before it begins giving its thing that grows out of it, and eventually becomes a plant or a tree, then the seed loses its metzias. The seed rots in the ground. And the word rekovin means rotting, wasting its own metzias, wasting away. Amameli said that the rekovin agar and shenirkov alidei hazriya ba'oretz v'nifsad tzurosei hu bitl yeshusei hakoidem she'ein ze mitzad hakoyach hatzoimeach ki im alidei hazriya ba'oretz hari hu nirkov alidei lachluchias ha'oretz sheniknas boi umizbatel bi'atzmai. So here we see we're going to dance on two chasanas. On the one hand, we're going to say that really the bittul is mitzad something else, and yet we're going to say that it's a bittul, that it's a bittul mitzad atzmi, even though it's mitzad something else. So what happens when you plant in the ground the seed? Then he said it rots away and it loses its whole form or shape. Nifsad tzuros. So he said that's the unit from bittul the yeshes Akoida. Because before it had its surah, and now it loses it, rots out and sort of, yes, how do you call it, rots into the ground and loses that surah. So he said, that's doimetadin from bitla ayeshes. And he said, she'ein ze mitzad the koyach hatzomeach. Well, you might say, well, what causes that? Is the koyach hatzomeach that we talked about, which is gil elikus. The etzem koyach hatzomeach is gil elikus. So maybe there's a ha'oref, and the koyach hatzomeach is meir upon the garin, and he just loses his whole, comes on the koyach hatzomeach and says, here, you've got to grow, we want you to grow, I'm elikus, I want you to grow. And so the garin just says, oh, and loses his whole materials, and he just starts growing. So he said, no, there's a low kacha. For the time being, the koyach hatzomeach doesn't really come into play at all. Because he's not growing anything, and nothing is growing out of him. First of all, he said, he becomes botel, yeah, in his own, ki'im alidei, but what is his own? He said, hazriya bo'oretz. Now, he didn't do that himself either. The seed didn't sort of walk along and just pop into the ground. He was somehow or another cast into the ground. You know, he was cast, he was sown. He said, but it's not the koyach hatzomeach, it's not the divine force, but it's this effort that was made to put him into the ground. Yaharehu nirkov. And what is he? How does he rot? He can't just rot in his own self. He rots alidei lachluchias ha'oretz sheniknas boy umizbatel be'atzmei. So here we see that two things outside himself are happening here, but at the end of the day we say mizbatel be'atzmei. First of all, we say that he was sown into the ground, Zriya Ba'or. And then we say that it goes into him the moisture of the earth, the moisture of the ground. Lachluchias is moisture, but lachluchias goes into him, and then he's bottled. We said he's bottled out Musay. He himself becomes bottled. And it's only just that the Zriya Ba'oret and the lachluchias in the ground, they help it. But he becomes bottled bi'atzmos. So that's what the shana we should do. It's the zriya ba'aretz, and it's the fact that there's lachluchis in the ground. When not both of them, he wouldn't become botel. So therefore, the Rebbe is going to put on the in the brackets a form of like a modification of this idea. And what is that? The Eino Hanami, he only becomes bottled in the real way when he's in the presence of the koyach hatzomeach. Because we can imagine him becoming bottled in another way. Dahainu, that we could just throw him on the ground and leave him, and he would rot. But then he wouldn't grow, he would just rot. And if you just take any form of wool or peiras or anything, you just throw them on the ground in a rubbish heap, and they rot. But they don't produce anything. That's almost a rotting. And so he doesn't rot in that way. He rots in a very positive way. So the Rebbe is going to say, why does he rot in that positive way? Because he's in the presence of the koyach hatzomeach. The koyach hatzomeach doesn't do it to him, but he's in the presence. In other words, he's aware of the koyach hatzomeach, but not the koyach hatzomeach is what makes him botel, but he's, as it were, he's aware that there is a koyach hatzomeach. Now, it's going to be very important why we have to say that. However, these two inyonim of just throwing him, we saw that you could have thrown him someplace else. You could have thrown him on our rubbish and he would have rotted just any old way. But you didn't do that. You threw him into the ground. So he just needs that for him to rot the right way, you got to put him in the right place, and there's got to be certain other things which help him along. Otherwise, he can't do it. But ultimately speaking, we're like waiting for him to do it. And when he does it, then the koyach hatzomeach comes in and produces out of him what's going to happen. In other words, it's almost like a self-produced Indian inside the Garin, that he himself becomes bottled in himself. He himself is aware that there's a koyach hatzomeach, and that the ultimate kavanah is that so he's going to make koyach with that connection with that koyach hatzomeach, and then the seed in his own self just loses his materials. And what he's really doing is losing his materials akodemus. It's not bittul be'etzem hamahut. So kum tois lefizeh. Here we got a wondrous idea that if certain factors are not met, it's not going to happen. And we could say that that's a marshal for the way it is in life. Unless certain factors are met, you're not going to just become bottle yes. You're going to become a bigger yes than you were before. In other words, what helps you become bottle is the first way you learn in Tolkien Tamima or in other Tamima. In other words, you get put in a place where at least somebody tells you that there's such a thing as Elikus and the Avish, you have to be bottle. You're going to be bottle. And that helps you, at least. And then there's water. Yeah, they teach you. They teach you how to be masig in yonim and Elikus. Teach you how to be masig in yonim. So that's like lachluchi is, it's like dampness, and that goes in. And then he's able to, but what actually happens, if you don't do it yourself, then nothing's going to happen. Yeah, the first basic rotting away, that's got to be your own piece of work. The yeshiva tells us as the greatness of the it's there, you're present in it. Yeah. You've been thrown into the right ground, you've been thrown in the right place. And then it feeds you into yourself a lachluchis. You know the famous story? No, you don't. It's not famous, but it's a story. As it was with one of my mashpiyim, Rabbi Pliskin. He was Rosh Yeshiva Adar Torah, or the mashpiyah, many years ago. He was in Australia when I first met Rabbi Chassidim. He was in Australia. I was there to know him for a couple of years at least. He was an unbelievable Siddiq. So the Rebbe eventually made him one of the mashpiyim in Adar Torah. The Rebbe actually appointed him. The Rebbe said he should do it. And the Rebbe said to him in Yechidus, the Rebbe said, Ich will as ihr sollt reinbringen the lachluchias from Chassidus in die Bocher. In these particular Bocher, I want you to bring the dampness of Chassidus. That's what the Rebbe said, the lachluchias of Chassidus. Anybody knew Rabba? This is bullseye. There's a bullseye, b'teich bull. And Rabbi was such a person that he gave over this sort of seeping things that just got into you and they made you different. You know? It like seeped into you and gave you the power to be a different sort of person than what you were. And that's called dampness. So that can be given to you, but it can just gradually dry up again. It's got to fall on a seed that's willing to be bought out. You understand? The fact that you planted in a place where there is a koyach tzomeh, that's important, because you could rot somewhere else, and then you rot never. There's a place in a place like that. And then after that, there's lachluchias. They call it sinners. Lachluchias. And that goes in. Oh, but then you become bottle yourself. And I mean, I'm fairly dikazah. I'm that little seed that you sowed, he, as it were, he becomes bottle. It's not the taste that he just rots. Somewhere or another, all these things in the world have all got their own way of functioning. They all know what is going on to a certain extent. And there was a man from the Friedrich Rebbe in the early years, I think it's Pei Aleph or Pei Beis, but the Friedrich Rebbe writes over there that they look in a microscope. So they state that a kli megadol gadol shenikra microscope. As they state that if they look at a microscope nowadays, they can probably look in 50,000 bigger microscopes. What they look at nowadays, the Rebbe says that in the seed you see all sorts of hundreds of. Have we got a minute here, by the way? Do we have a minute? I want to say something with a minute. Do we have a minute?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
With me together we have a minute? Okay. It's not so bad. So, he says that you can see over there, inside the garden, you can see thousands of things. They stay taught in the mind, you see all sorts of little inyonim and things. And I say, nowadays they call them atoms and molecules, and in fact, mental, just what they call it. Yeah. Now the quantum physics is this relates to that, and that relates to something else. And Einstein said this is moving this way, and this is coming back the other way, and they don't relate, or they do. Weird there, they can't really tell. It's all inside this little weed thing. So you want to tell me that all that's going on but it's just a goyim, it doesn't know what's going on here. It's all just happening inside itself, but it's nothing. What Chassidus is Machadis, that's not true. There's never anything what the Eibush should put in things into it which it doesn't have some sort of consciousness. It's in some way or another it's aware. However, the Garin willingly becomes bottle in a way that we don't understand. For sure, it's not the way our Adam becomes bottle. Over the Garin becomes bottle. It's not just that he is bottle; he becomes bottle. Why? Because first of all, you Zoreh, put him in the right place. Satan says, you gave him a certain lachluch he is, and therefore he becomes bottle. If he doesn't have that, he can't really do it. I gave for Shefer was. Because the molecules in they need the H2O or whatever it is. I gave us what they need and they don't need, and they do and then they'll become bottle. I mean, it's a perfect, unbelievable thing. That's a beetle mitzadatmas. The God in himself becomes bottle. I mean, it's a Indian, and now he puts in brackets, and you can't compare that to if you would have thrown him on top of the earth. Just thrown him on a rubbish heap, he would have also rotted. But then he would have just rotted down, and he wouldn't have become bottle. He would have just rotted away. Never. It would have been like the end of his career. He would have just rotted away. Because he wouldn't have been in the presence of the other curse. So we're not going to see in Ruchnias. What is that in Ruchnias? Ruchnias says that you've got to run away. That's Merida. You've got to have beetle and displeasure with yourself. You've got to run away. But you only can do it if you're aware of the Eibush. If you feel Elakus, then you can rot. But if you don't feel Elakus, you fall into Atzvus. And those take. See, that's the. And then there's another Indian, but that's a Chassidus, that's a Lachluchias. So now it's Yuvan, B'tachlis, our dictum. What the Rebbe said to Rababa, Oliver Sholem. I'm tempted to say Zecha Tzadik Levrocha, but I'm sure if he heard me say that, he'd be very angry with me, so I won't say it. But Oliver Sholem, that's what the Rebbe said to Rababa. He said that he wants him to bring the Lachluchias and Chassidus into the boys and out. Good. Okay, my dear gentlemen. So now what I want to talk with you about is I want that we should say, because I got a phone call from Robert Bolton.
Okay, do you want the camera on?
What?
Do you want the camera on recording?
Oh,
I'll turn it off.